President, this afternoon we begin the discussion of cybersecurity legislation. And I think it's important to say at the outset that I think everybody who hears the notion that the Senate is talking about cybersecurity would say, boy, you got to be for that. I mean, we all read about cyber hacks regularly. So you say, why not be for what they're talking about in the Senate? I want to begin by way of saying that the fact is not every bill with cybersecurity in the title is necessarily a good idea. I believe this bill will do little to make Americans safer, but will potentially reduce the personal privacy of millions of Americans in a very substantial way. And in beginning, I think it is particularly telling who opposes this legislation at this time. The Business Software Alliance has said they cannot support this bill. They have members like Apple and IBM and Microsoft, and they're saying at this time they can't be for this. The Computer and Communications Industry Association, they have members like Google and Facebook and Amazon. They have said, Mr. President, they cannot support the legislation at this time. America's librarians can't support it at this time. Twitter can't support it at this time. Wikimedia Foundation, Yelp, can't support it at this time. The groups that I'm talking about are ones with members who have companies with millions and millions of customers. And they're saying they can't support this bill at this time. I think I know why. These companies who didn't have a problem with previous kinds of versions of this legislation are saying they don't support it. These companies, Mr. President, are hearing from their customers. And they're worried that their customers are saying, this doesn't look like it's going to protect our privacy. Of course we want to be safe. We also want to have our liberty. Ben Franklin famously said anyone who gives up their liberty to have security really doesn't deserve either. So we know what Americans want. I would submit that the reason these companies are coming out in opposition to this legislation is they don't want their customers to lose confidence in their products. And they're looking at this legislation, and they're saying that the privacy protections are woefully inadequate, and their customers are going to lose confidence in their products. Now, I appreciate that the managers are trying to make this bill better. It's quite clear to me, having listened to two colleagues that I respect very much, that they are very much aware that their bill has attracted widespread opposition. Widespread opposition. Comment was made, Apple, Google, everyone should be for this. I would say, again, respectfully to my colleagues, the authors with whom I've served since we all came on the committee together, even with the manager's amendment, the core privacy issues are not being dealt with. And I'd just like to read now from a few of the comments. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there I heard a list of all the privacy issues that have been addressed. I haven't seen any privacy groups that Democrats or Republicans look to say that they support the privacy protections in the bill. But let me give you an example of a few who surely don't. Here's what Yelp says. Congress, and I quote, is trying to pass a cybersecurity bill that threatens your privacy, unquote. Here's what the American librarians are saying. I'll admit, Mr. President, I'm a little bit tilted towards librarians because my late mother was a librarian, but we all appreciate the librarians we grew up with. The librarians say that this bill de facto grants broad, new, mass data collection powers to many federal as well as state and even local government agencies. Salesforce, a major player in the digital space located in California, says, and I quote, "At Salesforce, trust is our #1 value, and nothing is more important to our company than the privacy of our customers' data. Salesforce does not support CISA and has never supported CISA." And they got a hashtag, follow Stop CISA, if you want to update. Here's what the group that represents the Computer Communications Association, this is Google and Amazon and Microsoft, the biggest major tech companies. Again, Mr. President, these are companies with millions of customers. And the companies are worried that this bill lacks privacy protections, and their customers are going to lose confidence in some of what may be done under this. They say they support the goal, of course, which we all do, of dealing with real threats and sharing information. They state such a system should not come at the expense of users' privacy, need not be used for purposes unrelated to cybersecurity, and must not enable activities that might actively destabilize the infrastructure the bill aims to protect. Now, Mr. President, we heard my colleague, the chair of the committee, member of the Finance Committee, who I work with, often, he said that the most important feature of the legislation is that it's voluntary. The fact is, it is voluntary for companies. It will be mandatory for their customers. And the fact is, the companies can participate without the knowledge and consent of their customers, and they are immune from customer oversight and lawsuits if they do so. I am all for, Mr. President, companies sharing information about malware and foreign hackers with the government. But there ought to be a strong requirement to filter out unrelated personal information about customers. And I want to emphasize this, Mr. President, because this is probably my strongest point of disagreement with my friends who are the sponsors. There is not in this bill a strong requirement to filter out unrelated personal information about these millions of customers who are going to be affected. This bill would allow companies to hand over a large amount of private and personal information about millions of their customers with only a cursory review. In my judgment, information about those who have been victims of hacks should not be treated in essentially the same way as information about the hackers. Without a strong requirement to filter out unrelated personal information, that is, unfortunately, what this bill does. Now, at the outset of this discussion, Mr. President, We were told that this bill would have substantial security benefits. I heard for days, for example, that this bill would have prevented the OPM attack. It would have stopped the serious attack of government personnel records. After technologists reviewed that particular argument, that claim has essentially been withdrawn. There is a saying now in the cybersecurity field, Mr. President, if you can't protect it, don't collect it. If more personal consumer information flows to the government without strong protections, my view is that's going to end up being a prime target for hackers. Sharing information about cybersecurity threats is clearly a worthy goal, and I would like to find ways to encourage more of that responsibly. Yet, if you share more information without strong privacy protections, millions of Americans will say that is not a cybersecurity bill. It is a surveillance bill. My hope is, Mr. President, working in a bipartisan way, by the time we have completed this legislation on the floor, that will not be the case. Mr. President, I yield the floor.